What is going on, everybody? We have just got back from holiday and started to semi-unpack. Today we just noticed when we were driving the boat that the throttle cable is a little stiffer than we would have liked. So down here, because it's a foot throttle, but you can do this with hand throttles that are up here as well, on the control box on the remote. So I've already taken the liberty to loosen off the throttle screw here, which I will do, and then I will pop it out of the socket here, and then we pull the throttle cable up to a position that's comfortable, and then we slip this. Just at this stage, this is just a piece of old compressor hose. You slip this over the top, you fill this end up here, you flip that over the throttle cable, which I will show, then you fill this up here with your oil can, so you pump it up pretty much full of oil, and then all you do is plug it into your live compressor line over there and let it do its thing, and the compressed air actually forces oil all the way down between the outer sheath and the inner cable. And the way you know to stop is when you see it coming out at the other end of the throttle under your outboard cover. So I'm about to hook this up now and I will get back to you. Alrighty, so I've got the throttle cable off. I've put the nut and bolt, if you've got a foot throttle, always put those back in the hole that it came out of so you don't lose them. I've then slipped my eyelet. You can just see the slight misshapen part there. That's the eyelet of the inner cable, and I've slipped it over the shaft of the brass outer cable, and this black part here fits in there. So I've tightened down that hose clamp. Hopefully it's going to be tight enough that it's not going to leak all over the floor, and I'll fill it up with the lubricant and then zip tie it somehow so that when I put air on it, it's not going to create a problem and lay sideways or do anything else. And probably it usually takes sometimes an hour, depending on the length of your boat and the length of your throttle cable. Take you a little bit more than an hour or so, and then you should be good. Should be good to go. So I'll fill her up with oil and get back to you. Alrighty, so we're hooked up. I just had to replace a couple of Scotty dodgy hose clamps. As you can see, they've been over tightened and stripped out, so I had oil leaking everywhere. So this tube here is now filled with oil. Okay, it's been a couple of hours at least since I've had it hooked up there, and it's done its job. As far as I know, it's done its job. Two telltales is I've taken the engine cover off. If you listen, you can hear air coming through the throttle cables on the ins and on the outs. These guys here are very well oiled up. You can see the oil on my fingers, just rubbed on the underside there. It is a brilliant trick. And of course the other telltale is there's a patch of oil where it's run back down the line. So the next thing to do now would be disconnect the air, wipe my hands, put the throttle back together and see what it feels like. Alrighty, it's all back together and worked really well. So yeah, probably the whole process probably took 2 hours. Would have taken a lot less actually, but you can see now there's just absolutely no binding. Everything is nice, slippery, lubed. Usually we will rev it to there, it'll come back to there, and then we can pull it right back with our toes like so, and that will idle in gear, and that gives you a really nice like 3 knots just like that. So that's really cool. But stamping on it like that, it does return back to where it normally would. And if you hook your toe over it like what I do when I'm normally driving, if I'm not wearing jandals, I'll floor it and put it down. Now what I did notice is the actual whole throttle moving, on the floor there, so I'll have to look into that as well. But for now, throttle cable lubed, done, cool. And like so many other things, it didn't work. Basically what happened was I had to go in there with a multi-tool and a chisel and just pop the sender up, which I successfully managed to do. And what happened is when I first put it in, on part one I suppose you're going to call it now, part one I first put it in and I didn't account for the fact that I hadn't sealed it off correctly from the actual, just the hole in the tank, and some resin slid down the inside of the fuel sender, which is on just on a slide, and it basically just sat on the base of the sender, and the little plastic float that is the rheostat part of it that floats up and down with the fuel gauge was glued to the bottom. So we went away to Picton and we didn't have a fuel gauge, so we were gassing up every night after we came in and going out again, completely oblivious to how much gas we actually had. So anyway, that being said, pulled it out, instantly identified the problem, popped off. Yeah, when I popped it off, I gently just pried it with my craft knife and went around the inside of the plastic ball, and then broke it free, and then I made sure that I cleaned and moved the gas gauge up and down. I then plugged it back into my reconnectable plugs there that can only go one way. I've got a big terminal and a small terminal, so wiring for dummies. So basically I hooked that back in, moved it up and down, and hey presto, the gauge is back. So of course, if you didn't already know this, most people do, just normal pink Bondo, when it cures, is impervious to fuel. How do I know? I googled it ages ago when I, by mistake, bored a hole in my fuel tank in my Pontiac and proceeded to flood the garage with half a tank of fuel. And after researching the internet and panicking because the car was running, driving and on the road, it turned out that I could just fill the hole with Bondo and leave it a couple of days. So I did that, and not a drop ever. It's been like 2 or 3 years now. So I Bondoed it back in, making sure that no Bondo went into the tank, but also making sure that I had a good enough seal so that when I resin over it in the morning, I'm going to resin over that, do a couple more sheaths, and then that will give us a week for that to go off completely, because as far as the rest of it goes, there's absolutely no leaking from the tank where the fiberglass is. So I've just got to patch that over now, so I'll be doing that tomorrow morning. The things we learn, eh? But anyway, fiberglass works, Bondo works, and I figured that out pretty much straight after I did it. So there you go, life's always teaching us things. Cheers.